Can you believe that there are only 4 days left until the first start line of Run Disney's marathon weekend this year? And for all of us doing Dopey, that is going to be the first of 4 amazing start lines. So today we are going to talk about the 5K and some different ways to think about it. The 5K is an interesting event if you're doing all of the Dopey races. And the reason why it's an interesting event is because it's far enough away from the marathon that if you race the 5K, it's probably not going to affect your marathon too much if you're an experienced runner, but it's enough miles away from the start of the marathon that if you're a less experienced runner or a less strong runner, that the way you approach the 5K could actually have a really serious effect on how your marathon goes. All right. So we talked earlier about nutrition and carb loading and how to approach that. And, one of the keys here is continue to get glycogen into your body. Now, 5K is always a fun race. It's short. It's normally in a standalone 5K. It's kind of balls to the wall, put it all out there and, cross the line, with the battery on empty, right? Now, we don't normally, most of us, put a lot of effort into fueling for a 5K, right? A 5K for most adults is going to be less than a 1 hour race. Right now, if you're running 16-minute miles, it's going to be right around there. But, people running this race are going to range, if it's the same as in the past, are going to range from around 14 minutes at the really front end, pointy end, all the way up to over 90 minutes. And don't forget, this race, there will be plenty of characters, although it's never going to feel like in the 5K, it never feels quite like there's as many as you would expect. The genesis of the 5K at Disney is it started out as a family fun run. And it kind of remains that way. It is timed for Dopey participants. It's generally not timed if you're not doing Dopey. So if you're just doing the 5, 10, half, or the full on their own, or any combination that's not Dopey, your bib's not going to have a timing chip unless they changed it for this year, which we of course won't know until we pick up the bibs. But one thing here is first, definitely get some glycogen into your body. So we talked about fueling. I would strongly encourage that you take something shortly before the race, usually a gel about 15 minutes before the start of the race. Now, depending on how long you take, you may not want to add anything during the race, and that's fine. If you're running, an hour or less, the general consensus is that you don't need to add supplemental fueling. Adding additional fueling usually is thought to be beneficial when you're in an endurance event that exceeds 1 hour. Same thing with hydration on the 5K. There is usually only two hydration stops. There will be one at the midpoint and then one shortly before the end of the race, and that should be good enough for most people. I would not bring extra hydration or my own for a race this short, especially going through Epcot. And like worst comes to worst, you track down a water fountain, which there'll be several. On this race, it's 3 miles. And 1 mile of that will be outside of the park, and roughly 2 miles will be inside the park. The path has changed pretty significantly through Epcot the last couple of years as the construction that was going on has changed. And now there's actually quite a bit more in the park than there used to be. There had previously been a bunch that was kind of backstage. Now, one of the things to be aware of is as the first race, you are going to feel your freshest showing up at the finish line. It's almost a shame that the races aren't in the other order with the marathon first. And just because, like, the marathon is really where you want to show up, like, super sharp and energized. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So, the main theme for the 5K, if you're doing Dopey, is restraint. And what I mean by that is you can go and all out race it. And if you're a fast runner, the temptation is always there to run it, as a 5K. I would encourage most people to pull back, run it more like you would a training run. That doesn't mean it needs to be slow. For me, my normal 5Ks are about 3 minutes faster than my Dopey 5Ks. So they're still pretty quick. And I do stop at every character stop and get my picture. And then I move on to the next one. Um, this one for slower runners, there tends not to be sweeping, although, of course, that could change at any time. And Disney has changed their position on sweeping over the years. But you should have plenty of time to stop at all the characters and keep moving through the parks, but keep restraint. If you are going to be doing Dopey, you still want to show up at that half marathon and the marathon with pretty fresh legs. However, this is where thinking about how you're going to approach the other races matters. If it's really important to you to go out and run your heart out and just have tons of fun, just kind of racing this little 5K, there's really nothing stopping you, but you have to think about how you're going to approach tomorrow. Running the 10K, you don't want to show up with sore legs. And in races like this that tend to, that are back to back, what happens is the fatigue that you build up, it compounds day after day after day. So you don't get fresher as the week goes on. So my suggestion for pretty much everyone out there is to take about 10 to 20% off of your normal paces. And that's how I would suggest pacing this race. So instead of running it in your normal like zone 5 or zone 6, maybe you pull back to like a zone 4 or even a high zone 3. On the other end, the classic, as long as I've been running these races, the classic advice I have heard and been given is to really just walk the 5K. I think that might be a little bit excessive, but for some people that might be the right strategy. But certainly the intent is correct is, pull back a little, treat it more like a fun run, versus treating it like a race. Now, if you're at the really pointy end and your goal is to win it, then by all means go out and race it. Just recognize that you're going to have that much more work ahead of you preparing for tomorrow. Now, after the race, the 5K is interesting. 10K is pretty similar too, because if you are at the front end of the corrals, meaning if you're in, the first, say, 50% to start, don't know how many corrals there will be at Dopey. I believe it went, if I remember right, at Wine and Dine, I went to E, went to D or E for the, I think I went to E for the 5K. There's a good chance if you are running a 5K that is under 25 minutes, it is likely that you are going to cross the finish line and hear them still sending out runners who are just starting their race. So that creates an interesting situation because the course actually follows the same path that the buses use to exit. So the buses will not start moving until the very last runner has made it into the park. And then they have to clear the course of all the cones and so on before the buses start getting moving. So if you are in corral A, B, and probably C, you are going to have some time to kill. So let's talk about that. You cross the finish line, and the finisher chute at Disney is quite long. It's over a half a mile, usually, from the time you cross the finish line to the time you exit the finisher chute area. In there, you're also going to have opportunities such as use the toilet, and then outside the finisher area, where the main stage is, there's usually 4 characters, and the characters do rotate day to day. So what we do is, me and the group that I'm in, we meet each other at the finisher area, just outside the finisher area. And then we'll go and get our picture taken at all the characters, do the I did it picture. And depending on what time it is, we might grab a cup of coffee at one of the food trucks. It's usually 4 or 5 food trucks in that same area. And then we go ahead and wait for the bus. Now, every weekend is different. Luckily, this year, the weather is looking like it might be actually really nice with temperatures in the 60s at the start line and maybe in the 70s or even low 80s for the marathon at the finish line. So, standing out there is probably not going to be too bad. At other race weekends, standing out there waiting for the bus can be quite cold. So, waiting in line for the characters is not so bad. One way around that, if you expect to finish super early, so like suppose that you're expecting to run a maybe 15, 20, 25-minute 5K, you can, of course, always drive or Uber. And that route does not cross the path, so you're free to exit there anytime you want. The delay is really only for those taking the Disney buses. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you tomorrow as we talk about the 10K and the half marathon. And with that, be fierce, be you, and I'll see you tomorrow.